New York City Common Investment Meeting for January 18th, 2017, and Happy New Year. Okay, we're going to start by convening each board meeting. Let's start with Fire. Steve Cassidy.
Roll is Mr. John Adler.
Yes, but put your mic on, Steve.
The mic's not working.
Hey, the mic's not working
now.
over here. Okay,
No.
Now it's on.
now it's on.
Yeah.
There you go.
Mr. John Adler.
Yes, I am here.
Miss Susanna Vickers. Here. Mr. Antonio Rodriguez.
Here.
Mr. James Slevin.
Eddie Brown has a proxy for James Slevin.
Mr. Gerard Fitzgerald.
Here.
Mr. Eddie Brown.
Here.
Mr. John Kelly.
Here.
Mr. Jack Kelty.
Patrick Dunn's proxy for Jack Kelty.
Mr. John Farina.
Use your mic. Yeah, hit the button.
Liam Guilfoyle, proxy for John Farina.
Mr. Paul Farrow.
That's Paul Mannix is proxy for Paul Farrow. He's at the restroom.
Right. Mr. Thomas Fallon.
Yeah.
And Commissioner Doug White.
Here. We have a quorum.
Great, thank you. Okay, let's move to the Police Pension Fund. Mr. Sens.
PBA, Dan Torelli with the proxy for Patrick Lynch, John Puglisi, and Mubarak Abdul-Jabbar. SBA. Oh, sorry, Corey.
Corey Grable, Chairman, PBA.
Sorry about that, Corey. Sergeants.
Bob Ganley, designee Fred Mullins, SBA.
LBA.
Lou Turco, LBA.
CEA.
Mike Endall for Roy Richter, CA.
DEA. We know Mike Palladino is here. He's in the house. Police Commissioner.
Rosemary DeBellis for Police Commissioner O'Neill.
Mayor.
John Adler, designee for Mayor Bill de Blasio.
Thank you, John. Commissioner of Finance.
Antonio Rodriguez, designee for Commissioner Jock Jihad.
And last but not least, Controller.
John Dorset, designee for Controller Scott Stringer.
Thank you all. Mr. Facilitator, we have a quorum.
Thank you. And I just want to, before we move on to the next fund, I just want to make a note that this is the last Police Pension Fund board meeting for Sergeant Bob Ganley. And I'd just like to give words of appreciation to Bob for representing the SBA so ably. I think for many years, certainly since before I got here, but since I've gotten here, I have observed him do a great job representing the SBA and as a trustee of the Police Pension Fund. So thanks, Bob.
Thank you all. I appreciate the kind words. And as I said it in our disability meeting, everyone in this room and those that are not in this room and work behind the scenes have the best interest of the members of their particular funds at heart, and the beneficiaries of this fund are really blessed to have such dedicated individuals. So thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Okay, thanks, Bob. Moving on to the teachers' retirement system. Who's calling the roll there?
I'll do that, John. Thad McTeague. So the roll is John Adler.
Yep, present, still here.
Thomas Brown.
Here.
David Kazansky.
Here.
Charlotte Beyer.
Here.
Deborah Penny. And Susanna Vickers.
Here.
We have a quorum, Mr. Adler.
Thank you, Mr. McTeague. And New York City Employees Retirement System, Ms. Mazza.
Good morning. Mayor's Office.
John Adler, present.
Controller's Office. Here. Public Advocate. Borough President Manhattan.
Present.
Borough President Brooklyn.
Present.
Borough President Bronx. Borough President Queens. Borough President Staten Island. International Brotherhood of Teamsters. Here. Transport Workers Union.
Here.
District Council 37. We have a quorum.
Thank you, Ms. Mazza. And lastly, I'd like to ask Sandy Rich to
introduce Burrs.
Morning, Mr. Adler. Board of Education Retirement System represented by Isaac Carmignani and Benjamin Schuldiner, both trustees. We do not have a quorum, but we will meet tonight.
Great, thank you very much. Okay, that we are officially in session here, and I'm going to turn it over to Scott Evans to take us away.
So thanks very much, John. Welcome, everybody. Happy New Year. We are going to attempt to continue to move this meeting in an efficient fashion, targeting to be done in the early afternoon with the new procedures that we've all agreed to and we tried out at the last meeting. As we start the new year, we have two major personnel moves that I want to make you aware of, formalizing roles in the Bureau of Asset Management. We recently named Alex Donier to be the Deputy Chief Investment Officer of Private Markets and Mike Haddad to be the Deputy Chief Investment Officer of Public and Tradable Markets. These two gentlemen have been instrumental in helping us professionalize BAM, make it a true investment organization, develop staff, develop procedures, formalize the investment committee that BAM has, et cetera. This recognizes their current role and their deepening formal role in our investment process. We are going to be coming to you over the next few meetings sort of annual updates on our control and risk functions. We're going to have Shachi Bhatt talk to you today about compliance. Next week, next meeting, Kara Schnapper is going to come and talk to you about the operations restructuring that came out of the Funston report. She made a report a little more than a year ago. We're going to give you an update, and at that time, we'll show you the new organization chart that'll have these guys' new titles on them. But the chart doesn't change for what we just did. We just changed their titles. The reporting relationships and investment strategy remain the same. But we're doing a lot of reconfiguring in our operations area, and Kara will talk to that next time. So we'll send out an updated org chart then. So we're going to have Shachi today, Kara at the next meeting, and then Miles Draycott at a future meeting to give you an update on risk, where we're doing a lot of work. And with that, I'll turn it over to Shachi, and I'll be back for a small item after she's done. Shachi?
Good morning, everyone, and Happy New Year. I'm Shachi Bhatt, the Chief Compliance Officer for BAM. My colleagues are joining me. I'm here to provide you with an update on everything we've been doing in compliance. You may remember that I visited your boards in November of 2015, and at that time I said I would, provide you with annual updates. So here I am with the 2016 overview, and then I'm going to also add some 2017 initiatives at the end. As always, if you have questions, please don't hesitate. First, I'd like to introduce my staff. This is Sonia Cowan, the Senior Compliance Analyst who joined us in September of 2015. And next to her is Susan Rhee, our Compliance Analyst, who joined about 6 months ago in June of last year. We currently have an open compliance position for a third analyst, which has not been filled yet. So, one of the things that I thought was very important when I arrived was training. I think ongoing training is very critical, and so in 2016 I worked with the Conflicts of Interest Board to coordinate COIB training that was dedicated to BAM, investment manager related issues, what are conflicts of interest that could come up in our industry and how to deal with those. We also worked with the Controller's Office of General Counsel in June of 2016 to conduct Foreign Corrupt Practices Act training. And really, we wanted to empower our staff to, recognize red flags if they're working with managers who possibly work with other clients that are, sovereign wealth funds, et cetera. Is there anything they should keep an eye out and, escalate to us as necessary. And last but not least, in December of last year, so just a couple months ago, we had a refresher training, again, hosted by our Office of General Counsel, to remind BAM staff, everybody in BAM, what their duties are as a fiduciary, and why is that important, and why is that important to, serving the beneficiaries of your systems, and, what they need to keep in mind. We have additional training planned for 2017, but those were the highlights from last year. So we also implemented some policies. I'm going to go through the highlights of them here. There were some additional smaller policies, just emails and this kind of thing. First and foremost, we reorganized how we monitor meetings. So all in-person meetings now are reported on what is called the BAM calendar. It's an online calendar. And it captures all meetings with third parties, such as funds, managers, consultants, maybe service providers, or any vendors that the systems might have hired. We capture these in an online calendar, and attached to every meeting is a survey. It has just a few questions. Were any gifts presented, or were any inappropriate meals or refreshments provided, and again, it was really designed to streamline our documentation process, and B, ensure that there are no potential conflicts. Last year we had over 500 manager meetings that the investment strategy and BAM staff conducted, and we found no issues in any of them, so it was great news. The second and probably biggest policy that we implemented in July of last year was the Controller's Office personal trading policy. The personal trading policy monitors BAM staff, all of their brokerage trading, their personal brokerage trading information, to make sure that really they're not misusing any of the information they learn here for their own personal gain. It's designed to protect the systems from any possible, again, misuse of information by any employee in BAM. We've also extended it to key employees in our Office of General Counsel, our executive group, and it's soon to be the Bureau of Accountants, some people in the Bureau of Accountancy. Anybody that touches the information that comes through all of your systems will be subject to this policy, and it also helps protect employees and help them maintain compliance with federal and state securities law. The policy, as I mentioned, was rolled out in July of last year, and implementation is underway. We're expecting it to be fully implemented at the end of this quarter. I'll pause here for any quick questions. Any questions so far? Yes.
Going back to the online calendar, we also have a policy that affects trustees, as you know,
Yes.
of NYSERS and teachers. And I provided you with information about my office, but I haven't heard anything since then in terms of what your office is doing to ensure compliance of that policy from NYSERS and teachers trustees.
Sure. I mean, we can certainly talk about it in more detail in your specific caucuses, but I think what we do on our end is we monitor the managers to ensure that, they're reporting any meetings. Our questionnaire that we send them specifically says, any meetings with Controller's Office staff and the trustees of those two boards. If we see anything that comes through on our end that says perhaps they had a meeting with you, my policy would be to reach out to you and say, did you meet with XYZ manager on this day? They're reporting this. Can you confirm that? And then I think quarterly, maybe what we can do is, have a more in-depth conversation with you on whether you have records that perhaps our managers didn't report, and if they didn't, then we would escalate it with our
Right. It would seem to me that that would make
Yeah.
more sense in terms of compliance. If
Yeah.
they're having a meeting with us
Sure.
that they are not reporting, that's really what concerns you, not that they're reporting a meeting that
Correct.
they did have, right?
Well, yes, but I think both are important in that. What if they report a meeting that they come to and they accidentally bring a placement agent to a controller's office meeting? We would want to know and be able to, react to that very quickly and shut it down. Yeah. Our calendar is also, we're looking at the process to try to better automate it as well. So I think we'll be able to reach out to you and give you some more solutions that, you know, make things easier rather than time consuming and tedious. So. So the last policy I wanted to highlight is actually an existing policy, but I wanted to provide you with an update. So each year, an annual certification of ethics and compliance in a questionnaire format is sent out to all public and private market managers, so essentially everybody. The questionnaire has about 45 questions. They range from, you know, are you a registered entity with the SEC or any other financial organization, to do you have policies in place to prevent pay-to-play violations, etc. We also ask for a few documents in addition to the questionnaire, such as, you know, SEC registered firms form ADVs. It's an annual disclosure that they provide to the regulators. Organizational charts, you know, some just training and information on their compliance program. We're really looking to enhance that sort of review each year, and so this is why we've started asking for even more information. The questionnaire is a mandatory submission for all public market managers. The questionnaire is optional, but it's strongly encouraged for alternative managers. I will say that in 2015, which is, you know, the April in which I arrived, that summer we received 70% completion for private market managers who, again, it's optional but strongly encouraged. Last year that number went up significantly. I think it's closer to 80 or 85% now. So we're on the uptick of getting everybody to comply, and this year I expect that trend to continue closer to 100%. And as of last week, we did get one more manager in, which I can mention and discuss in the executive session if you'd like. I'll say that the questionnaire covers things that we like to have them recertify each year, but it doesn't ask any new questions that have not been covered by the extensive due diligence process on the front end. So, you know, I don't want you to be alarmed that you're seeing managers who have not responded. I feel pretty strongly that the due diligence and the ongoing monitoring that we conduct does cover all of the questions that we ask. So if a manager were to, you know, not be compliant in one of those areas, we would find out in many other ways other than the questionnaire.
So, of just the 20% of the private market managers that do not respond, what is the usual reason? Is it just they're small, the fund's dead, and they're just kind of hanging on, or?
I mean, I don't know if they're hanging on. I think it's probably a mix. There are some places where it's illegal to ask some of the questions that we ask, you know, as far as personnel issues, because they have HR policies in different countries that, you know, privacy reasons don't allow them to give this information. Some of these are what are called runoff managers who, you know, haven't responded. I think the questionnaire is great because it conveniently, selfishly, for the compliance department puts all of the information in one place, but it's not information that we couldn't find on our own, you know?
Just one more follow-up. Are we, and I might direct this at Alex, but maybe both of you, are we requiring, or can we require, completion of the survey for re-ups?
We can certainly discuss it. So I'm sorry, Alex, but I think...
I would add, I think the way I would answer that, John, is that we are asking that information when we do diligence on re-ups. So to Antonio's point, most that are not responding tend to be folks in our runoffs where they haven't received capital in their last fund, so they don't feel compelled to respond to this optional survey. But every re-up that comes before the board, these questions are being asked and answered.
Okay, thanks.
I would say we ask even more than what we put in that, so, yeah. Oh, I'm sorry.
So, is it required that if they do not complete the optional questionnaire, that they give you an actual reason why, or are we just assuming that the reason why they're not is this or that or the other?
We currently are not requiring a response for non-submission. It's something that we can certainly look at for this year's.
I think that might be a good idea.
Yeah.
Dave, it's the key thing is getting the information, and so it's mostly a question of the cycle of when we get the information. The annual survey is geared to the public markets, and the private market managers that do it as an accommodation to us. Some of them are big enough and they're raising funds frequently enough that they've got staffs where it's no big deal to fill out our survey. The smaller PE firms, they work on a cycle of when they're re-upping the new fund. That's when their staffs are focused on and geared up to answer these kind of questions. And so, as long as we can get the information from them, we've not, there are only so many things you can make a deal about and put a line in the sand on. This is not one that we've done this with. We do put a line in the sand on getting the information. If we can't get the information, we don't re-up with them. But this is a place that I think insisting on absolute conformity, puts unneeded pressure on them.
And just to add one more thing, I think that because we ask for so much of this information, all, if not more, of this information on the front end, it's unusually, if not next to impossible for these managers to change their, fundamental compliance policies that we ask for. We would find out that let's say they removed their anti-money laundering policy. It would be unusually rare for any manager to just eliminate that policy. And in our questionnaire, one of the things we ask is, do you have this policy in place? We like to, again, ask it because it's a nice place for us to have all of this information at our fingertips, but we ask it during the due diligence process, so I have a high level of comfort that they would continue those policies as they continue to do business with institutional investors such as us, such as the systems.
Right, and I'm not saying that we need to force every single private equity firm to do that.
Sure.
But there should be, in my opinion, at least some sort of response that they have it, and that the reason they're not filling it out is that they're too small, or we just did a deal with them 2 months ago, and it's onerous to fill out all this information. Just some sort of notification that they're not just not answering because they don't feel like it, but that there's some sort of logical reason why they're not doing it.
Sure. I'm going to make that note. Thank you. So we have a few 2017 initiatives as well. This is not our only to-do list. Our list is long, but I didn't want to bore you with the whole thing. One of the things we're looking to do is we have many policies for our compliance department that we maintain in-house. We're looking to create a manual that really centralizes this. This is pretty common in traditional investment advisory firm. It centralizes everything so we know what our responsibilities are, and everybody else in BAM also understands, these are the things that compliance looks at and checks and is responsible for overseeing. And we're gonna, work with our business units to make sure that we can help get that up and running for our own department, again, to keep us accountable. I think it's important that compliance is just as accountable as everyone else. We're also automating the review of existing and recommended managers against the New York City Campaign Finance Database. So currently, when we are performing due diligence on a manager, or looking at a notice of search or an RFP for public market managers, they provide us with the names of all of the employees at their firms that they consider covered by the SEC's pay-to-play rule. We compare those names manually right now against the database. We're working with our information technology department to automate that and help, catch things like if someone is giving lots of small donations in order to stay under the radar of the New York City limits. They're hoping to, give multiple very small donations to not get recognized. We're looking at that in aggregate now to say, hey, this person gave $1,000 or $10,000 over however many cycles or small donations, this is something that we should look at and, escalate to our Office of General Counsel for further review. So we're looking to automate the existing process, and we hope to have that done by February 1st of this year. It's almost done. Pretty close. I think that's all I have.
A question on that,
Yeah.
Shachi. I'm not sure if folks saw the news yesterday.
Yep.
Could you address that, please?
So, and Richard Simon is here in case you have additional questions on this. We had a few, I think, managers who are runoff managers, or yes, venture capital runoff managers, who I think have not given us capital in some time. And prior to the pay-to-play rule going into effect, I think is when we contracted with them.
To be very specific, the list of names of the SEC fines for violations of pay-to-play for making political donations was a firm by the name of NGN Capital, a venture capital firm that we last committed to in 2007. I think aggregate commitment across all 5 systems was $50 million. And the second one was Aisling Capital, another venture capital firm. I believe that was 04, meaning our commitment to the firm under $50 million, and they made varying contributions to different city officials, anywhere from a couple of $100. I think one was $1,000 was the largest that I saw, and that was the reason for the penalty. I think the SEC penalty, the largest I saw was $75,000 or $70,000. The other was 10
I think the largest penalty was $100,000
But
by
of
the
the
SEC.
firms, those 2 firms, I don't think.
Oh, yes.
I think there was one more, Alex. Cypress, which is a very old commitment from New York City from, I believe, 1999. Okay.
You may be right. Those are the 2 that caught my eye as I glanced at the email and the release, as P&I reported it yesterday.
Yeah, so did you guys know about this before the SEC announced the fines or knew that there was an investigation or anything?
I did not.
We did
not. We're not on the boards of those funds, first of all. I'm also not sure if they would have disclosed it, but the answer is no.
Okay. Because just from my perspective, when the SEC announces fines of firms in which we invest and the fines are related to the New York City pension funds, that sets off alarms. And I think if you guys know what's going on, it would be very helpful to inform the trustees ASAP so that we don't get inquiries, and not know what's going on.
Right. And we did. I mean, we found out about this, when you did. So we certainly will take that tone going forward. And again, there was nobody that was issued a fine by the SEC that we're actively involved with. Some small, very old commitments that have been in the runoff phase for years.
Okay.
I think, though, our new process and our additional steps to focus on this are going to help. I mean, we've identified it, and we've spent a lot of time trying to really make it robust and accurate so that going forward we are catching these things before the SEC and saying hey, what is going on? So.
Okay. Thanks.
Yes. Oh, I'm sorry.
Just a very, very minor point, but on the last page of the memo where you talk about the reviewing the database, I think it should be more clear. You should put the word automate in there, because right now it says just review, and it sounds like we weren't doing this before.
Sure.
So it's very suggestive that we weren't engaging in this review, which obviously is not the case. So just for due diligence purposes, we should fix that.
Sure. Thank you. Yes.
Hi. So the seat's improved, but the microphone hasn't. Thank you, Mr. Adler. I guess mine works, so I should be
You should
grateful.
take Mr.
Yes.
Dorse's.
This
Should I
side-
take
this side's
offense
still
that
better.
should I take offense that your seat improved because it means that you're not sitting with us anymore, Ray? Is that it?
I would not suggest that that's meant offensively. Just 2 quick things. One is in the interest of transparency and accountability, is there any intention to make the compliance manual available, like, publicly, just so folks know what we're thinking about? And then secondly, in a similar vein, is there any plan out there in the future? I should preface this with, I'm delighted you're here and your team is here, and I'm really pleased with the work. And then secondly, is there any intention at some future date, as these things get up and running and have been in sort of a stable situation for a while, of having a sort of third-party independent kind of review of the compliance of BAM? Thanks.
So as far as policies and procedures, I mean, I'm open to it. I would like to just check with our Office of General Counsel just to make sure that there is nothing in there that we, are not permitted to disclose. And I think having a third-party review compliance is a great idea. I mean, our internal auditor, while I recognize she's still within the Controller's office, does operate completely independently of myself. We constantly welcome her, input, guidance, and have her come in and look at our process and tell us, is this best practice? Is this what we should be doing? We also, currently we work with other pension plans in a roundtable format, just collaboratively to say, this is what we're thinking of doing for, pay to play. What do you guys do? How do we make our processes better? So yeah, I'm always inviting additional guidance, support, feedback. That's the only way we can get better. Absolutely. No other questions? Well, thanks so much for your time. If you have any questions, I'm around.
Okay. For our next act, we're going to get you into the action of using your tablets. So if you're using a mobile device, I want you to make sure you're in the meeting. And if you have paper, just hold on. I have separate instructions for you. But if you have a mobile device, up in the very right-hand side, there's a little tab. It's unmarked, secret tab. I want you to click on that tab, and it should then pull down a menu that'll have an item that's called placeholders and rebalancing ranges. And you'll probably have both. You'll have two of them. One of them says updated. You want to click the updated, and that'll take you to the numbers for your system that I'm going to cover. I'm going to show one system up here, but you'll want to follow along for your system. If you don't have a mobile device and you're using this printed book, it's actually going to be more complicated, because I want you to go to page 9 in the book, which is 6 pages from the front. That is not a trick question. So 6 pages in, you'll find page 9, Appendix A, and that's what I'm going to be talking to. No. Okay, that was not the mobile device instruction. That was the paper. So you want to go to the tab in the top right-hand side, the pull-down menu. Go back to meeting. There's a tab on the top right-hand side. It'll pull down the items. You want to go to the updated placeholders and rebalancing ranges. Yeah. If you're now totally confused and can't follow at all, I'm going to show you one system's numbers, and you can go back later and look at your systems. They're all very similar, but I just wanted you to be able to follow along with the rebalancing ranges and placeholders for your system. They're largely the same, but because different systems have different asset classes, there are some differences. Okay. All right. I think everybody's with me. So this is a follow-up item. I should have included this in the formal asset allocation motion so that we formalize placeholders and rebalancing ranges at the same time. If I had to do it over again, that's the way I would do it. Instead, I wrapped it into the Statement of Investment Principles, which I presented to you last September. Included all kinds of things in terms of, how do we formalize our divestment policies and a bunch of other stuff that works in and out of the investment policy statements. And as you all know, we're pursuing those items on different tracks with each board. Each board has a different way that they'd like to pursue those items, and so we're doing that. But we do need to get these passed now, because we're in the process of implementing the asset allocations, and we have to have placeholders, and placeholders are the public asset classes that we store the allocation in for real estate or private equity until such time as they're drawn down. And the rebalancing ranges is the range around the targeted weight that we can go without having to come back to you for formal exceptions. So let me start with the placeholders. And again, this is one of the systems. It's one of the uniform systems, and I put it up here because they've got all the asset classes. Your mileage may vary, but they're largely going to be the same, as you can see. And we've tried to simplify and streamline the proposed placeholder assets to get them closer to a public equivalent that's closer to the behavior of the target private asset class, as close as we can get, but the placeholders have to be a little bit more liquid. So for instance, in opportunistic fixed income, the best match would have been some match of high yield securities and bank loans. That would track the best. The problem is bank loans are not liquid, and so it's a poor placeholder. So we have regular fixed income securities. So as you can see, private equity, just a tweak to 100% U.S. equity. Real estate, since we have different allocations to core and opportunistic, they have different levels of aggression, with 40% U.S. equity for core and 60% for opportunistic. You notice the asterisk. The asterisk denotes, and there's a footnote in your updated package, that for real estate, we can use U.S. REIT securities as a substitute for U.S. equity in this proposed placeholder. And we have in many systems, we have a REIT balance. There's no allocation to REITs, and what we're going to do is slowly run off the REITs in the placeholder portfolio. So we're not in any particular hurry to do that. The REIT portfolio has been doing fine. It's not a good long-term match, and we're happy to hold REITs as U.S. equity in the placeholder bucket. Infrastructure, we had no placeholder before. We just used the real estate. It wasn't quite right. You need to have more global equities, and Treasury inflation-protected securities mimic the behavior of infrastructure assets better. So that's why you have the mix that you have there. In hedge funds, we've also tilted the mix a bit towards global assets, and we have specified the subcomponents of Core Plus 5 fixed as we've specified them in the asset allocation. Opportunistic fixed income I covered. The one thing I'll say, you see the double asterisk there. In place of high-yield securities, we can hold convertible securities. Again, we have no allocation to convertibles. We have good convertibles managers. They've been doing fine. And what we would do is slowly burn that portfolio off as our opportunistic fixed income is pulled down and the high-yield securities component begins to diminish. On rebalancing ranges, we've stratified those as well. They're largely the same. We have tried to look at them holistically. They're generally about 40 to 50% of the overall allocation. And the objective here is not to give us a lot of range for tactical maneuvers. The whole reason for this is to give us flexibility when the market moves suddenly. The best example I can have is the so-called denominator effect. If the public markets were to suddenly plunge for some unknown reason, and the private markets would move more slowly. Now, if we'd actually have to get out of private market assets, they'd of course, be marked down as well, but they take a while to mark. And so you have a denominator effect where the private assets show as a higher percentage of your portfolio. We all experienced this in the global financial crisis, and we want to make sure that we've got enough room if that should happen. Buried in the Statement of Investment Principles was a sort of ground rules for how we would behave on rebalancing and tactical asset allocation. And we've been practicing this since we came into office. Plan to continue practicing this as long as I'm here. But I wanted to formalize it. And that is that our default is that we stay close to the assigned asset allocation. Staying within, in our current practice, we try to stay within 1% or so with each. If we take a purposeful variance, if we're purposefully tilting the portfolio away from the strategic asset allocation, we talk to you about it. We talk you through it. We may take the position in between SIMs, and we'll talk to you at the next SIM about it, but we don't let meetings go by where we're just ignoring the fact that we've taken a tactical bet. Any tactical bet, any tactical bet where we're purposefully doing it. The place you can see that today is the whole duration discussion with our Treasury portfolio. And in the past, it was the core plus 5 mix in the short-term position. We'll continue to do that. We don't have a procedure for that now. We've suggested one to go in the Statement of Investment Principles, to go in some way or shape or form into your investment policy statements. We'll continue to talk about that. But the reason I bring it up is the reason for the rebalancing ranges is not to accommodate tactical asset allocation. It's to avoid things like the denominator effect. And so I'll just quickly, you guys all have them. They're generally narrower, actually, than they had been before. There are some that are wide, like treasuries. I got some questions. Do you really need 4% for treasuries? We're not totally sure. What we're doing with treasuries is the big decisions are not the over-underweight. The big decisions are the duration of the overall portfolio. We're trying to be very transparent with you about that. You got a big presentation from Mike and Robert at the last meeting. We'll continue to update you on that. When we get through this, we think we ought to tighten it. We're fine. But even if it was a very narrow range, we could play around with the duration of the portfolio, which would make a much bigger difference. So it's not a big issue. But
what's shown here for all maturities, U.S. Treasuries, and longer than 20 is different than what was in the guiding principles. And it seems like the leeway here of 4% for both is much more than we had talked about, at least at the NYSERS board.
Yeah. Yeah. So remember, you're not looking at NYSERS here. You're looking at NYSERS there. Yeah. Yeah. So what we have, what we're facing is a situation where we've got two systems that have allocated to all treasuries, right, with a duration that looks like the old core plus 5 portfolio, the treasury piece of it. You've got two systems that have allocated to long treasuries, which is a longer duration. And we're moving out of mortgage securities, out of investment grade securities, temporarily into buckets of treasuries that are going to have similar durations to what we're coming out of, and then we'll slowly move into the duration that we have going forward. And so, again, we have some wider rebalancing ranges here to accommodate the swings. We may not need them. We're unsure it's the place in the portfolio that we've left ourselves the most room, because the portfolio is very different from the current portfolio is very different from the target portfolio in terms of these weights. But we're going to be very clear with you, not only the weights, but the duration of the portfolio along the path. And NYSERS is on a different path than teachers, police and fire. NYSERS and BRRRRs are on a different path. They'll end up with a different duration. And so we need these ranges to kind of accommodate that. But again, if you could make a very tight duration, I could still within that, you can make a very tight rebalancing range, and I could still within that have extreme positions in terms of how I made up the bucket that could actually cause even more problems. And this is why, communication is everything. And so we talked to you about the plan. We'll continue talking to you about the plan. And, if at the end of this that, there's no need to have that wide a rebalancing range, we're happy to talk about tightening it. But for the time being, because we've got these buckets and some big movements going on, we wanted to leave ourselves a little bit of room, if that makes sense. Yes? Alden.
I think it might be in conjunction to what you just said. So if we had zero allocation, how can we have a rebalancing range, right?
Yeah. So, and this is what Robert and Mike talked to you about before. So when you look at the longer than 20 is a specific bucket, right? You see nothing in NYSERS and BRRS. We're not going to put anything in that bucket. The all maturities.
It's not true. It says 8% on the NYSERS book. So it seems like you did one book for everybody.
The NYSERS book says at 8% on long treasuries? It says 0. Yeah, it should. You may be looking at the teacher's book. The teacher's book says 8. The NYSERS book says 0. So it's pretty easy. The allocation for teachers, police, and fire to long treasuries is 8. For NYSERS and BRRS, the allocation is 8 to all maturities, right? So they're just different destinations. But in the all maturities, you have the, back to Alden's question, you have the multiple buckets of different durations that we'll use as we, I'm sorry, Letitia, did I misspeak? It's 5? Yeah. And so we'll use those buckets to build the duration as we move over time. So for instance, with teachers, that has a 0 target to all maturities, and all the target is in the long duration, we're gonna have a fair amount of all maturities during that transition as we're walking up the duration towards the target duration, and the long duration bucket will increase over time. So I need both of those components in order to have that gradual movement to the right duration. And it's mostly about the transition period, but we wanted, there are some big movements in the transition period, and we wanted to express that formally in the range. We can, once we're there, we can go back to it and readjust. We wouldn't need to adjust on an ongoing basis, I wouldn't think, once we arrive. Mike, have I described this correctly? Okay, good. He's controlling me by remote from back there. Any other questions? Antonio.
All right, if you want, first on, I guess I'll start with, you did placeholders first, so I'll do placeholders first.
Yeah.
First, kind of on a broad level, can you describe kind of the process that you went through in determining the new placeholders? I know you're thinking about matching them closer to a PME, but just like how, like, what was kind of the involvement? Who was kind of in, and what was the thinking behind it?
Yeah. So let me use OFI as an example. Where's OFI? Okay. With OFI, we had our old placeholder was 50% core plus 5 and 50% high yield. We did some talking, we did some modeling, we talked to all the consultants about this, and got feedback from all of them. And what we came up with is something that I think everybody was comfortable with. It's not exactly what everybody had come back with, but you have something that's actually not far from what we had before. What we flirted with was having 50% bank loans and 50% high yield. That actually is the best fit. And we got that feedback. But bank loans are not liquid, and we went back and forth a lot, and we decided a placeholder has got to be liquid. That's the whole idea of a placeholder. So we substituted the components of core plus 5, and we talked a bit about the fact that the weightings are quite different than our weightings in fixed income in the portfolio. So why are we using such different weightings here? Different purpose. the weightings are different in the overall portfolio because we have a lot of Treasury securities, particularly if you're teachers, police, or fire, long-duration Treasury securities, to provide defense. They're uncorrelated with the rest of the portfolio, which is fairly aggressive, and they help to hedge the portfolio. Opportunistic fixed income is an aggressive component of the portfolio. You actually don't want that much defense in it, so you would end up, if you had the same Treasury weight, having too much Treasuries in the overall portfolio. This is going to come as close as we can with liquid securities to mimicking the behavior of the portfolio. When you do bring it down and put it into opportunistic fixed income, you're going to get a high yield component, and the rest of the component is going to be more like a bank loan. It's going to be more inflation friendly, and so it's a little different. So the reason I picked this example is we couldn't quite get there, but we got a little closer. If you look at infrastructure, we had nothing except for real estate. But infrastructure is much more international than our real estate portfolio is. And so we felt that we ought to have something that looked a little bit more like the All-Country World Index in the weightings in the equity. And so that's why you have a lot more developed U.S. equity and some emerging markets U.S. equity. That's basically an ACWI weighting. The other thing is that rather than core +5 fixed income, or treasuries, investment grade, and mortgages, we wanted to have inflation protected securities because they behave more like infrastructure. And so this cocktail, which we went back and forth with, it keeps it liquid and it gives us very similar type behavior over time. Of course, with all of these, by going from public liquid assets to private assets, we hope to pick up some extra returns. So we want to get the money out of the placeholders and into the asset classes, but this is as good as we can do with liquid substitutes. So we followed a similar process, Antonio, for the other asset classes. The consultants were all involved, and it was an iterative process. And I think what we ended up with is very close to a consensus, but not exactly like any of the consultant recommendations. In some asset classes, we took it precisely, but in most, everybody agreed this was a good place to stop.
As a follow-up to that, then, certainly our private equity portfolio also has a international equity, and why not use a portion of or have a little bit of a developed equity in there as well?
Yeah, we went back and forth on it and just decided to keep it simple. But you're right, we could have. The folks that were working on the other two that went with the global, thought it was more important that we do that. We do have a international component. That was one that we just try to keep it simple. But
and then last, I guess, on the for asset classes that have treasuries as a component of their placeholder, is it seen that for the ones that have long treasury, the all maturity bucket?
Yeah, it'd be the all maturity bucket. And there's another reason, Alden, that we would have, in teachers, we would have some in the all maturity that would be there for placeholder reasons. And for the same reason, in teachers, we would have a sort of core +5 duration, which is several years shorter than the long treasury. Again, different purpose for the allocation.
And then for NICERs, though, would it still be the kind of our core allocation, or all maturity still?
No, with NICERs, the treasury component is going to look very similar because it is the all treasuries, but the treasury weight will be less. Mm-hmm. It'll be more like it'll look more like the Barclays Agg, with about half as much in treasuries as in the other two asset classes, and that's reversed when you look at our overall allocation. Because again, whether you're talking about NICERs or teachers, you're attempting to use treasuries in the main component to play defense, to provide uncorrelated assets to the risk assets. We get about 70% of the allocation in risk assets, both equity and fixed income related. And then you divide it between deflation assets, which treasuries would be, and inflation protected, which TIPS and core real estate would encompass. Infrastructure.
I just want to say I don't really accept the rationale that you said for private equity. The previous placeholder is 75-25 international. We have, generally, when you bring an international fund, you're comparing it to IFA. You're not comparing it to the Russell 3000 with an international fund in terms of PME. So it makes no sense to me that we would shift from a 75-25 to 100% U.S. or from a global to 100% U.S. since what we're doing with private equity is what is our divide between U.S. and international and private equity?
I think it's. Let me answer the question this
Thank
way.
you.
When we looked at the exposure that we have in private equity, it is about 75 to 80% U.S., but the balance, John, is Western Europe. We don't have, so when you look at anything outside of Western Europe, it's less than 3% on aggregate. We had some plans prior who were just 100% U.S. equities, Russell. The NYSERS had a combination. But I think that when you look at indices out ex-U.S., there were other components driving those indices where we didn't have exposure.
But we have developed. I mean, you can call it developed. It, to me, makes much more sense to say, okay, you want to say international with an emerging markets component. Let's say, developed. It just, honestly, given that that's how we measure the PME, right, is you're using IFA generally for measuring PME for international funds, right? Am I wrong about that?
We look at both.
But generally, when you show it to us, it's or
No, when we show it to you, we're showing it to you with the U.S. Russell 3000 for the overall portfolio.
No, for the overall portfolio,
Yeah.
I know, but for the
when we look
individual fund managers, when they come in and show us.
Yeah. So when you're examining, any component fund, you'll use a more precise benchmark. So if we're looking at a.
So why not use that as a placeholder?
Well, because as Alex said, we don't have, we would typically use. The European funds, we measure them versus a European benchmark. You've got Japan, you've got other things into IFA. IFA is the narrowest mandate. Look, this one was on the margin, John. We could have kept it the same. We used the logic. I'm trying to remember if we used if there was any other logic that caused us to change. I don't think. We view it as a hill to die on. I think we're going through a lot of things and felt that this was going to keep things expedient and simple. But if the international component were IFA rather than including emerging markets and so forth, we'd be a little concerned about you'd trade a non-European Asia component for not having the European in, and so again, it's. I mean, if the board feels strongly, I don't think we care strongly about this one. We're just trying to keep it simple.
And then,
Other questions?
just last one on the rebalancing ranges. Have our overall rebalancing ranges in our allocation, and then because we hadn't deployed all the capital, we would up the percentages in the in our reporting books. So we'd have our kind of our asset allocation, and then our adjusted asset allocation. Yes. Do you envision that that's still how it would kind of look, that given that, let's say we're at halfway for OFI right now, so that extra 2.5% would be allocated across, and then the rebalancing ranges would go from there. The rebalancing range would go from the extra, let's say 1% that goes into high yield. So we would, instead of having 3% on what's our high yield allocation?
Yep.
Let's say.
Yeah. So does the rebalancing range start from the adjusted asset allocation? The answer is yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. Otherwise, you really get into problems that you're making for yourself. Okay. But yes, we work off of. We show you both because you got to see what the real asset allocation is. Mm-hmm. But the one that we work towards is the adjusted, where money is sitting in the placeholders until it's drawn down. That adjusts the actual portfolio, and adjusts the actual target, and then from then we apply the rebalancing ranges.
Thank you.
Yeah. Other questions on this? Okay. So, yes, Ray.
More simply, in terms of the volatility asset class is, I guess, one of the biggest variables in determining your ranges for the rebalancing. But how much of your expectations and what is going to happen in the marketplace in the next 2 to 3 years factors into adjusting these ranges?
It really doesn't. This is we're looking at it a long-term basis. We're trying to get ranges that are wide enough that we're not going to, I mean, you don't want to get into a situation where you've forced yourself to liquidate illiquid positions for no good reason because you've created a crisis. You want to leave yourself some room. You don't want to leave yourself too much room. You want to have some consistency about it. So this is why you see allocations that are about 40 to 60%, 40 to 50% of the overall allocation. There's some differences based on things like volatility and so forth. But importantly, if you sort of codify the behavior of rebalancing and proactive bets that are taken in the portfolio, tactical asset allocation, and how the board and BAM interact with each other. That to me is the really important thing. You don't want the rebalancing ranges to kind of wag the dog. You want there to be a good communication about tactical asset allocations when you do it. We may do it, and we're doing it in a sense in our slow movement of the duration of the Treasury portfolio. But when we do it, we have really, we think, sound long-term reasons, and then we think they ought to hold up to the scrutiny of your questions and concerns. And so we're going to be very transparent about them.
Thank you.
Okay. So thanks very much for this. I will very much appreciate a vote from all the systems at the caucus on this, because without the approval on this, it's difficult for us to move forward on the asset allocations and enacting them. So it's very important. Okay, with that, we'll go to the next item. That was the last item in public. Mr. Facilitator, we're done with our public session.
Okay, any other issues for public session before we go into executive session for each of the boards? Okay, we'll take it in reverse order this time, starting with NYSERS. Do we have a motion to exit public session and go into executive session?
So moved. Also, I'm here.
Yeah, let's make a note for the record that Bronx Borough President has arrived for NYSERS.
Also, Queensborough
and
President.
Queensborough President as well. Thank you. Okay, so the Bronx Borough President made a motion and seconded by whom?
Seconded.
Okay, by the Brooklyn Borough President. Any discussion? All in favor of the motion to exit public session for NYSERS and enter executive session, please say aye. All opposed, please say nay. Any abstentions? Okay, motion carries. Let's move to Teachers Retirement System. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, so motion made and seconded to exit exit public session and enter executive session for Teachers Retirement System. Any discussion? All in favor of the motion, please say aye. All opposed, please say nay. Any abstentions? Okay, Teachers Retirement System is now in executive session. Moving to police, is there a motion to exit public session and enter executive session? You gotta speak up so the court recorder knows who you are.
Make a motion to exit public and go into executive session. Dan
Thank you.
Torelli.
Second.
Motion made and seconded. Any discussion? All in favor of the motion at police, please say aye. Aye. All opposed, please say nay. Any abstentions? Okay, motion carries. And fire, is there a motion to exit public session and enter executive session?
Delcourt, so moved.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, motion made and seconded. Any discussion? All in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, please say nay. Okay, motion, any abstentions? No.
Enter an executive session and enter public session of the police pension fund.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Okay, Mike Palladino, all in favor?
Aye.
All right, none opposed, so moved.
So, Nicole, would you like to report out?
Sure. During the executive session, the trustees heard a presentation on asset level placeholders and rebalancing ranges. This matter was tabled. The trustees also heard a manager presentation in the asset class of real estate. Action was taken, details to be made public at the appropriate time. The trustees also heard a manager presentation in the asset class of economically targeted investments. Action was taken, details to be made public at the appropriate time. Also during executive session, the trustees selected a vendor to perform a carbon footprint analysis, details to be made public at the appropriate time, and also selected a vendor in response to an RFP for climate change risk investment consulting services, details details to be made public at the appropriate time. Lastly, the trustees terminated contract negotiations with a manager in the asset class of hedge funds.
So if there's nothing further, we just once again want to thank Bob Gainley for his years of service to the bank. Thank you. So if there's nothing further, would you like to make the motion, or would you like to second it as your final? Make the motion to close.
All right, second?
Second.
Thank you. All in favor? Aye. All right. So ordered.
Good. In public session, a report on asset level placeholders and rebalancing ranges was presented. In executive session, consensus was reached, which will be announced at the appropriate time. In executive session, a real estate investment was presented and discussed. Consensus was reached, which will be announced at the appropriate time. Also, in executive session, an ETI investment was presented and discussed. Consensus was reached, which will be announced at the appropriate time. Thank you.
Can I just ask you a quick question? Sure. On the rebalancing ranges in public session, should we state that we had consensus on that?
I thought I did. Okay. Maybe I didn't hear it, but we did develop consensus in executive session on the asset level placeholders and rebalancing ranges.
I think we're going to adjourn the meeting. I'd like to move to adjourn the meeting.
Second.
Board took action in executive session. They agreed to rebalance, to update the levels of placeholders in a rebalancing effort. They agreed to one real estate investment and one one ETI investment, the details of which will be disclosed upon contracting. Thank you. Made a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Second? Meeting adjourned.
The executive session, the board discussed various investment matters, reviewed personnel decisions, and also made decisions about which candidates to hire. Now we need a motion to adjourn. So is there a second? Are there any objections? Hearing no objections, we are adjourned.